Mr. John Lehman is currently the chairman of J.F. Lehman and Company, a private equity investment firm. He is well known for his service to this country, having served 25 years in the Naval Reserve. He went on to become the president of Abington Corporation between 1977 and 1981, and served as Secretary of the Navy for 6 years. Mr. Lehman has been a member of the 9/11 Commission as well as the National Defense Commission. He is also the author of many books, including On Seas of Glory, Command of the Seas, and Making War. He'll be available for questions after the service. Please stand and greet Mr. John Lehman.
Thank you, Timmy. Please sit down, everyone. Thank you for reading that resume that my mother prepared for you. And when I was invited to come here, I was very flattered. Episcopal is one of the finest schools in the country. It's produced over 2 centuries a very disproportionate number of the leaders of all of the parts of our society and government, and it's a great pleasure to be here. When I asked Father Jim how formal this should be, he said, "Well, don't try to be funny or clever. Just be yourself." So I'll try to do that. I have a lot to cover in a message that I really want to make sure that you hear, and then I'm really looking forward to your questions as well. So first, I'm here to talk about the 9/11 Commission. And as you know, our chapel theme this month is "With God, all things are possible." And certainly the national experience of 9/11 and its aftermath is a perfect lesson to dwell on that truth. I was appointed to the 9/11 Commission when the families of the 3,000 plus victims of 9/11 assaulted Congress and said, we have to have a true reckoning, a true investigation of how this could have happened. What were its roots? What did we do wrong? What were the motivations of the people that did this horrendous evil thing? And so the commission was created, 5 Democrats, 5 Republicans, selected because they were Republicans and Democrats. And all of us Republicans started out with the confident conclusion, without any facts, that it was all President Clinton's fault. And all of the Democrats were equally convinced, without any evidence, that it was President Bush's fault. And so it was from those 2 poles that we started this investigation. We were able to get 80 of the top experts in intelligence, in terrorism, and in the Middle East studies to come and work full-time to help the 10 of us get to the root of what really happened. And we decided from the beginning we were going to do a best-selling book, because the history of national commissions is that they produce great tomes, telephone books of facts that are printed by the government printing office and put on the shelf and never read by anyone. We really felt that this was a threshold moment in the history of our country, and we wanted people to know what happened and why it happened. And so we, from the beginning, fashioned and had in mind as our final product a thoroughly readable, but fully grounded in fact, not opinion, account of this terrible thing. And I think we succeeded in doing that. And I urge all of you who have not read it to get a copy. It was a national bestseller for years, and it's still available in paperback. It is very readable. I guarantee you the first 2 chapters, you won't be able to put it down. We did establish, and nothing has come up in the 8 years since we published it, to in any way question the findings and the conclusions that we had. And it is the definitive account of what actually happened minute by minute on that terrible day. And the next chapter is really, how did this happen? What are the roots of it? What kind of people could see as their life's ultimate focus to kill 3,000 other innocent human beings? How did this happen? And it is a very readable history. We were much helped by Professor May at Harvard and a number of other eminent historians who helped us understand the religious roots of this brand of Islam that produced this kind of evil ideology. And it brought home to all of us what all of you should really take to heart, that the old saying of Santayana that if you don't learn from the lessons of history, you are doomed to repeat them. This phenomenon could have been avoided at many levels. But most of all, the people who were dealing with it knew nothing about this phenomenon of fanatical Islamism. So we began our investigation. We interviewed over 1,000 people, former President Clinton, President Bush, former presidents, former directors of the CIA, current heads of the CIA stations that were involved, the FAA people, the controllers, the Air Force fighter pilots that tried to get there in time and didn't. And we actually, our staff and we went through over 1 million top secret documents that were relevant to this. And by the time we finished our investigation, after 18 months of almost full-time work for all of us, going through this to establish ground truth, the facts, not people's opinions or guesses, we produced a unanimous report. 5 partisan Republicans, 5 partisan Democrats, totally unanimous on what happened, what were the root causes, what were the vulnerabilities that still existed, and more important, 42 things that had to be done to fix these vulnerabilities. Now, if that isn't evidence that with God all things are possible, what is? And so the lessons we learned are not only that officials must do their homework, learn what their responsibilities are about, know history, know the nature of the government that they deal with, and above all, take up the risks and the challenges of leadership, of speaking out, of saying the unpopular thing, if that is what your investigations and your belief in a policy issue tells you is true. A perfect example of this, there was an immigration official down in Orlando, Florida, named Jose Melendez. And in his normal stamping, a young male Arab came through, and there was just something about him. And when we interviewed Melendez, who was a very religious, spiritual man, he just said there was a feeling of evil. He got a chill when this man stood before him. And he looked him in the eyes, and he just said, this man is very bad. And so he directed that he be put into secondary questioning. And so they did question him, and all his immediate supervisor said, you've got to let this guy through. He's a minority. You have no grounds for it. You have no evidence. This is going to end your career because this will cause lawsuits and so forth. And he felt so strongly about what he saw in this person that he would not relent. And he demanded that the head of immigration for the whole of South Florida be gotten out of his bed and brought in. And sure enough, when they went through the computers, they found all sorts of bad indications. One-way ticket bought with cash and other things. He was not on a no-fly list. Nevertheless, the head of immigration for South Florida said, well, okay, you're an experienced guy, I'm going to back you up, but you are risking your career. Well, it turned out this was the muscle guy. He was the 20th of the hijackers, and he was turned back, put on an airplane by Melendez, and returned to Saudi Arabia. And because of that, the heroic activity of the passengers in Flight 92 that crashed here in Pennsylvania were short of the person who was supposed to keep control, the muscle, who was this guy who was turned away by Melendez. He was right. He was absolutely right. He was later captured, this bad guy, in Afghanistan with Al-Qaeda, and is now down in Guantanamo Bay in Cuba, which is how we know all this happened. But Melendez was a true hero. He was excoriated by his colleagues. Don't do this, you're going to get us all in trouble. He stood up on his own beliefs. And that indeed is what happened in Flight 92, because they knew that they had killed, in that flight, the hijackers had already killed two of the flight service people, had killed the pilots, and had locked themselves into the cockpit and were flying the airplane. We now know that they were targeted and had the route to crash into either the White House or the Congress. And the reason they had two was they had already flown reconnaissance flights in other commercial airlines. They knew the White House is very hard to pick out when you're coming down that river approach, but Congress you can see from 50 miles away, the house up on the hill. So what happened was these passengers, knowing that they were not going to survive this no matter what happened, organized themselves, overcame the one muscle guy that was left in the cockpit, overwhelmed him, and then smashed their way through the cockpit door, and were able to force the two hijackers to dive it. Actually, the one hijacker, realizing, I mean, we have the tapes, we recovered the tapes, the cockpit tapes, and he's saying, they're going to get in, they're going to get in. I've got to crash this airplane, but we've got to go to Congress, and what are we going to do? And then there's a smash and a bang, and the people broke through into the cockpit, and that's the end of the tape, and we all know what happened. They saved God knows how many thousands of lives in Washington by not letting them proceed on their mission. That's the kind of people, that's the kind of leadership instantaneously. What is the right thing to do? Not what's the best way for me to find out, see if we can talk them into landing some way and save my skin. We've got to stop these evil people from carrying out their mission. And we found that through and through, in every instance of talking to all these policemen and firemen. Imagine the South Building had already collapsed, and yet 300 firemen with people streaming out, and everybody knowing that the North Tower was going to collapse very soon. 300 firemen ran in as everyone else was running out, and they were all killed. And so since that event, we've spent a a lot of time with the families who have, and every single person this has been a real spiritual experience for them. And in their recovery from losing their fathers, their sons, their daughters, their children, their relatives, their deepest friends, every one of them used the experience not to become alcoholics or nihilists or just to give up. Every one of them found the strength to turn this tragedy into doing something important. The commission itself was their creation. And we learned every single day we went in there, into the office doing this and producing that truly with God all things are possible. And these human beings today are powerful, strong, exemplary people and forces in their community and in Washington. So those are just a few of the thoughts of what some impressions that we drew. And before I close and go to questions, I would just like to leave you with a message. And that is that we're in a very perilous time. We've really done extremely well in countering and virtually eliminating the Al-Qaeda threat, but not the Islamist threat. We have much to be proud of, but we're beset by divisions in the government, deep, passionate conflicts. We have many people in the world and forces that wish us ill, that reject our Judeo-Christian values, and really see us as the principal enemy in the world. And the lessons that I took away from my experience on the 9/11 Commission were best said by the famous British parliamentarian Edmund Burke when he said, "All that is needed for evil to triumph is for good men and women to do nothing." Just say, well, it's not my responsibility. I'm not going to get involved in government or school boards and you have a special burden. This student body comes from all social, economic backgrounds, but you are all very privileged. And as the gospel says, from those to whom much is given, much is expected. And you have to take up these burdens of leadership, not just in the government, but in your community and in whatever professions you're in. Much is expected of you. And if people forget that lesson, and the people who come from privileged backgrounds, as all of you, by virtue of being in this school, do not take up that challenge, and instead just go try to make money and lead the good life, evil will triumph. So that's my short lesson for the day, and now I'd be happy for you to toss me a few fungos, and I'll answer them as best I can. Thank you very much.